first question for you, Rosie, here. What is the greatest challenge you have yourself faced transitioning from academia into your present career in impact measurement?
Yeah, I would say for me, the initial challenge, the first challenge that I had was adapting my communication style from academic communication with other academics who have a real deep interest, a lot of time, and a focus on your research, adapting that communication style to a more managerial or a more mission-driven, focused organization style where you are communicating with different stakeholders, like external to your team, you're communicating, and I suppose there's more shorter forms of communication necessary, I would say, and summarizing and recommending, rather than in academia we have a lot of time and space and freedom to really sometimes, most of the time, dive into a topic and discuss it, whereas adapting communication styles to shorter periods of time, shorter attention spans, for example, that's a place that I really struggled. And I think for perhaps the first year and a half, I was really rusty, and I used to explain things in a lot of detail with a lot of passion, and I used to really write a very long Word document description of something that now would just be a 2-sentence email, and that skill took a while to grow. So I think that was my honest first challenge when I first started working in this field.
Thank you very much. Okay, another question for you. How do you maintain and nurture your academic curiosity while working in this sector?
Yeah. So in my current organization, in the Laudes Foundation, we have the opportunity to join community of practices if we want. For example, there's a community of practice on impact measurement in the European setting, where every couple of months we can get together, we have a webinar, we discuss, and we can talk with other colleagues. Some of them are academics, some of them are practitioners, some of them are like me, they've made the jump from here to there and in between. So yeah, being part of a community of practice like that one helps to kind of stimulate academic curiosity. But also I use platforms, like there are a couple of magazines that have online types of articles, which you can find on LinkedIn quite easily from following relevant content, and engaging with those articles and those publications and bringing them to my team also sometimes helps to maintain like a dialogue with the external academic publishing world and bring that internally a little bit. And also in many foundations and organizations, you can start to nurture new connections with different like fields of academia that you didn't study in your PhD, which is really interesting. Like, for example, for me, I'm focused on evaluation right now, and I love working in evaluation and providing like results and insights to the foundation. But there's a whole field of academia built around evaluation practices, methodologies, reflective learnings, best practices that I didn't even know existed during my PhD. And now that's probably the field that I'm most excited to dive into. And of course, you will always be a researcher. Just because you graduate or move into a different field, you can still, if you want to, propose a paper to be published, for example. And what's great is that you would be basing it on your real life, real time reflections on your work. And yeah, that's kind of how I do it.
Fantastic. Thank you for that. Okay, we've got one question from Jaina, I believe. What is an added value for an NGO stemming from a PhD? Is it the title or the education aspect? How might this differ from the value of a graduate holding just a master's degree or a bachelor's degree?
Yeah, I think that it's not a case of one graduate being more valuable to the other. I think it's a case of PhDs and postdoc graduates have many different competencies and sets of skills that they can use in an NGO or a foundation or grant making environment that might not be immediately obvious. So PhDs and postdoctoral graduates have a lot to offer the field of NGOs and philanthropy. Like if I go back a few slides, for example, I can just briefly dwell here on the competency frameworks. Like if you're a graduate from a PhD or a postdoctoral program, you'll be able to speak very clearly to how, for example, you can manage a research project, you can manage a budget, you can work with others to achieve a goal, you can work within a time frame to achieve a work package on time, you can manage yourself, you can actually do the research, you can talk to one or two methods that you learned, you trialed, and now you can do. Doesn't mean that you have to do them as part of this role, but it shows that you have the ability to learn something new and to become confident at it, apply it, and have a great result. So I would say that more than one particular pool of candidates might have an advantage over the other, it's better to think about it like, what are the skills that only PhD graduates will have an opportunity to learn over these 3 or 4 years, where you're building up yourself and your skill set. So there's quite concrete examples that you can draw on as part of your PhD process, like managing your own budget, resourcing your travel, deciding, making strategic choices on where you go to present, which journals you want to publish in, and why. You can demonstrate critical thinking. There's a lot of advantages that you can draw out from your PhD process that will just be unique to you, and that's really where the strength is, I would say.
Thank you very much, Rosie. Okay, we've got a question that is, what is the key success from moving from academia, which is more paper-based, to NGO, which is more solution-based? How can junior research integrate to NGOs?
Okay, I'm just going to take down that question, if you wouldn't mind repeating it again, because it was quite long.
Absolutely. Yes, of course. Yes, yeah. So what is the key success from moving from academia, which is more paper-based, to NGO, which is more solution-based? And I think as a second question, we've got, how can junior researchers integrate into NGOs?
Well, how could junior researchers integrate into NGOs? I would say through, either getting a role or getting an internship, or simply reaching out to local NGOs and, volunteering for a set period of time. Is that the kind of answer? Is that the kind of thing that our attendee was asking, or was it more specific than that? Like, because integrating can mean a few things in a few contexts.
Yes, I think if the attendee can clarify, maybe we can come back to this later. Yeah.
Okay. And then on the key success, moving from like paper-based academia to NGOs solution-based, I suppose it depends on, again, what you mean by a key success. Do you mean a key success for me personally, like what I found rewarding about it, or?
Perhaps we can take that approach. Indeed, yeah.
Okay. So for me personally, when I graduated from my PhD, I felt very happy that I'd done it. I felt like it was a fantastic experience, and I was proud of my thesis, and my supervisors were wonderful. But unfortunately, I also felt very unstable financially, because, the university sector can be very challenging to find a permanent position, full-time, paid well, in an area that you're an expert in. It's not the case that all PhDs go on and find the perfect postdoc within a month, or the perfect job within 3 months, because the reality is that it takes a lot longer to find that security in academia. And for me, moving into the NGO environment as I did, where it offered me a start, and it offered me a way to basically start building my career, but also start building my life, right? Because I was being paid well, I had a full-time position, there were opportunities for me to progress if I wanted to, and I did. Over the 4 years of my first job, I did progress. I think I progressed 3 times. And that was a really great personal achievement, but personal comfort as well, because I felt very much at home and very valued in that first employer, which was actually Rethink Ireland, the Republic of Ireland's philanthropy and social innovation agency. So the biggest success for me was moving into a field where I felt like I had a lot of room to grow, and I felt very supported to do that, and also financial security. That played a role.
Thank you. Thank you, Rosie. I've got a comment and a question here. I failed in a few attempts to secure a research-based position in global NGOs, and my previous failure or expertise or experience really demotivated me. How do you sustain your interest to continue hunting for the position in NGOs that you really feel excited about?
Yeah, I would say three things actually. First of all, I'd like to say that I also failed a few times before I succeeded. I think before I got my first role outside of academia, which was as a social impact analyst at Rethink Ireland, I went for 4 other interviews and I wasn't successful in those. So it was my 5th interview when I got my first break, if you like. And again, when I was looking for a job more recently, I applied to a couple of roles. And yeah, then I got my next step. But so I would say it's very normal, unfortunately, to fail, because we do, like NGOs and foundations in general, get a lot more applicants than they have positions. So yes, just wanted to share that I also had that experience. But secondly, I would say it's useful to broaden your search to include positions that might not be researcher or research consultant, but they might be a position within, for example, an organizational learning team or an evaluation manager or even an evaluation officer, because those types of roles are involved in research as well, and they often offer opportunities to progress and to build your career and be in a different role in a year's time to the one that you started in. Like, those types of things they exist, and especially if you have your kind of research interests and you have your your finger on the pulse, you're looking at your field, you're looking at your organization, and you're seeing opportunities there. It's a little bit more dynamic in foundations anyway. In NGOs, sometimes you can have a smaller budget and be a little bit more constrained, but yeah, there's opportunities outside of just sheer research positions for researchers to fit in. So yeah, that's also what I would say. And then finally, I think what's really useful sometimes is going to the right conferences or joining the right types of peer learning communities or communities of practice. Like, you have to think a little bit strategically in terms of joining communities of practice or learning communities that are full of people, employees or consultants from the types of organizations that you'd like to work in. For example, if you'd like to work in a foundation, it would be a good idea to follow some foundations on LinkedIn and try to see what they're doing in their learning teams, because that's another word for research sometimes, organizational learning, organizational strengthening, evaluation and learning, data-driven decisions. These are all words that we sometimes use when we're talking about evaluation, research, results. They're more related to the internal side of things, but those are the types of circles that you might want to sit in, and you never know who you could meet and who you could be connected with, even digitally, and just it helps, I find.
Thank you. We've got a question that focuses more on postdoc scholarships. So the question is, how can the foundation help to find a postdoc scholarship? Can we have links, recommendations, or any other help from the foundation?
Um, I don't have any expertise in postdoc scholarships, unfortunately, because unfortunately for that for that webinar attendee who asked this question, because I haven't done one and I haven't looked for them. So unfortunately, I'm not the best person to answer that question.
Okay, thank you. And I know that obviously during your presentation, Rosie, you mentioned LinkedIn as one way where you can find where our attendees can potentially find related jobs. So we do have a question here: where do we find the job ads for this area? So I don't know if you had any additional sort of information you could share.
Yeah, sure. So I would direct you to this slide here, which I hope that you can see now. And I would perhaps start with just looking at some of the bigger NGOs and foundations on this slide. And of course, this is not an exhaustive picture, right? You have other foundations here in Europe. For example, the IKEA Foundation, the Skoll Foundation, the Laudes Foundation, where I am. You can start with a general Google of those, but looking at this screen and digging into some of their open roles, you'll also come across some of their projects on their website. And those projects are co-funded a lot of the time by academia, co-funded by other foundations, and so on and so forth. So you'll get links within links to bigger pieces of work where, researchers may be required. Unfortunately, I don't think that there is one central stop globally for jobs in this field. But yeah, I would say start here with impactsource.ai and Google some of the more well-known names in this picture, and you will come across their evaluation and research approaches, which is normally a section on their website. And you can subscribe to a newsletter, for example, where you would be the first to know if a foundation is opening up a call for researchers or a call for evaluators or so on and so forth.
Okay, thanks very much. And a question about your own experience. What was your first NGO project?
Ooh, my first NGO project, I worked, I'm going to give you a very quick overview of my career to date. So I did a PhD in looking at the experiences of the refugee community in the Republic of Ireland, and particularly asking research questions around housing instability, and like the feeling of being at home. So the extent to which people felt they belonged to a certain city in Ireland. That was my initial research focus. Then I got a role within Rethink Ireland, and Rethink Ireland are a social innovation funding agency, venture philanthropy agency. And my role was initially social impact manager, I think, social impact analyst, actually, I think. And as part of that role, I supported my manager to roll out funding on a fund called the Arts to Impact Fund, which was, if I can recollect, this is about 8 years ago, 7 years ago, that was a fund which supported local NGOs in the Republic of Ireland to use arts and wellness-based methodology to improve the lives of young people. So I think we had a group of about 5 NGOs, like smaller organizations, who were benefiting from our funding under this Arts to Impact Fund. And I was in charge of actually like supporting my manager to understand where we were having social impact and what types of projects got funded, but also what were the goals for each project and what was the kind of key indicators of social impact for each project, and then checking in every quarter with the NGO CEO or director to see how their project was going. That was my first role. Then at Rethink Ireland, I had a few promotions. I moved into their MEL, Monitoring, Evaluation and Learning department. I say I moved into it. I think I was it. I think it was just me when I started. And then, yeah, eventually, by the time I left Rethink Ireland, I was the head of monitoring, evaluation, and learning. And we had a few more people on our team because we'd been successful in getting some European funding. That's another key area, by the way, where researchers can really add skills to an NGO or foundation environment is through funding bids and through consortium development and fundraising from corporates and so on and so forth. Your results and your insights will help the proposal to be stronger and have a better chance of being funded. That's an area that I used to really enjoy contributing to as part of my job at Rethink Ireland. Then my second organisation I worked for was called Catapult in the UK. And what Catapult, Connected Places Catapult, actually do is they fund innovation in sustainable businesses. So again, they were a grant maker and they were giving out grants to local or more local businesses. And I was there monitoring and evaluation lead for the West Midlands. And then where I am now is the Laudes Foundation based here in Amsterdam. And I am the senior impact manager. So I'm responsible for a whole pile of things. I won't talk about all of them, but more or less what I do is I try to understand in the industries that we fund and the types of causes that we're most concerned with funding, where are we seeing progress and where are we seeing challenges, and how can we support our partners, so those would be our grant holders, how can we support them to make their impact, and how can we as a foundation learn from what we're doing every year, what's working well, what's working less well, and how can we ourselves improve. So yeah, that's my current role. And those types of roles I've just described, they exist worldwide. It's not always easy to find them, but they are pretty common.
Thank you very much, Rosie. Okay, we've got a question from Nazila, I think. As a PhD holder in biotechnology, bioplastic production, I cannot find relevant and well-fit places to my expertise with NGO. How can I figure it out?
Yeah, I think the question I'm hearing there is more for the webinar attendee to ask, what would you like to make an impact in? What's the field that you most care about? What gives you energy every day to do your PhD or to do your postdoc? Like, what are you contributing towards? And then maybe once you identify that, it could be, having less plastic in the world, or it could be something completely different. It could be progressing science and women's involvement in science. It could be whatever it could be for you. You identify what that is, and using that, I think, is a great place to start, because from there you can identify maybe foundations or NGOs that are working on that issue or that mission. And that's the best case scenario, is to try and work out what it is that drives you and what you want to work towards, and match that with an NGO. And the easiest way to do that sometimes is just Googling mission-driven organizations and then the mission that you want to contribute to.
Thank you very much, Rosie. And there was a question around whether there are any foundations, like I believe the ones that your slide actually highlights here, in Latin America.
I have never actually worked in Latin America, and I have actually never been to Latin America. So I unfortunately cannot give you an answer to that. But I know the answer is yes, that there are foundations that work in Latin America. And if I can signpost you for a moment, perhaps to check out the Porticus Foundation, Porticus, Porticus Foundation. It's a sister foundation to the Laudes Foundation, where I work, and they have a much more global reach and more projects that are spread across different countries. Excuse me. The Laudes Foundation also does, but slightly more concentrated geographies, I would say. But the Portuguese Foundation, have a look, see what types of grants they're giving, see what partners they have, and perhaps through that, you'll be able to find a bigger community of NGOs and philanthropies active in Latin America. But sorry, that's a limited answer, but that's the only place I can think for you to start your journey of discovering who's there.
Fantastic. Thank you, Rosie. And of course, we will be adding all of the relevant links that Rosie has just mentioned on the webinar page under resources.